All right, everybody, welcome. We are going to get started in just a minute. We've got the pre-party coming though, and believe it or not, today is my birthday. Woohoo! Yay! Hopefully y'all can see me. Woo. And you can hear me, hopefully. So, can you hear this? This is our jam song tonight, and the pre-party has started. Yay! Thank you so much for your happy birthday wishes. This is kind of my get ready jam. My secret is that before I go on live ever, this is my kind of get ready song. So if you have one of these, if you have a song that pumps you up, let me know what it is in the comments. Let's celebrate that together, because there's nothing quite like a pre-party song. The Beatles, of course, Sean uses the Beatles, which is great. I would expect no less. And they're classic and timeless, right? So before we get started, I just kind of want to give you that tip because it's one of the best engagement tools for your students as well as for yourself to kind of remember that we need that motivational piece just to kind of pump us up a little bit. And it can also act as a great activator, literally an activator for your lesson. Okay, so obviously I've been partying a little bit. Hang on. My chair just kind of needed a little change. Okay, so I want to start tonight with this piece right here. Everybody see this? This is the piece called Fanny from Chuck Close. And tonight's PD Periscope is all about how do you create a successful STEAM lesson from start to finish. So the transitions are seamless, that it beautifully moves from one part to the other. So the trick that I use is what's called a pivot point. You need to think in your lesson about an area that makes a very natural pivot point connecting to each part of your lesson. So here's what I mean by that. So you start an integrated lesson, any integrated lesson, with two standards, your content standard and your fine arts standard. And when I use this piece, this Fanny from Chuck Close, I'm actually addressing the two different standards. The first one would be the science standard from the Next Generation Science Standards for 5th grade, PS 1-3. Make observations and measurements to identify materials based on their properties. And then the art standard is an artistic process one for responding, and it's actually with the anchor standard, perceive and analyze artistic work. So hopefully you can both see that it's classifying and analyzing a piece. So in this process, the way I do this is that I always start with my arts strategy. And that's usually the best way to ensure a successful lesson is when you're starting with that art strategy. I just realized, by the way, that my microphone, my blue microphone, kind of looks like, I don't know, like a party hat favor over my head tonight. Anyway, side note. So you're going to want to start with your arts strategy because that's the activator, much like our pre-party music tonight. It's the activator for your students. So I usually, for a lesson like this, will start by giving students this image of Fanny and having them just observe it and either use the See, Think, Wonder technique, use I Notice Cubed, where they have to think about 3 different things that they're noticing, but really give them an opportunity to look closely at that work and make their observations. And you'll notice that at the bottom here, this is kind of turned around, but this says My Observations, and here is a headline. Sometimes I actually have my students create a 6-word headline that describes this. My favorite has always been there, done that, moved on for this piece. I loved that headline. There was a teacher in North Carolina that came up with that, and I loved it. So you start with that, but then you want to think about what's your pivot point because you have to connect it to your science standard. Remember, you have to get back into that science piece. So where is the pivot point? Well, You know, as an educator, or you will know in just a minute, that the artist who did this, Chuck Close, actually did this with fingerprints. So it's not a photograph, even though it looks like a photograph. He did it all with fingerprints. So that is your pivot point into the science standard. You have students, you reveal that this artist used fingerprints. You can provide a couple of examples of different examples of ways that fingerprints have been used to create art. And then you have students look at their own fingerprints and you start the observation process, which is back to that science standard. So you see how I did that? It was a very natural transition, but it's only because I thought about the pivot point. Where's the connector between my arts strategy and my art standard and the science standard? So thinking about that is really important. Once you get that part accomplished, and students, usually at this point I give them some magnifying glasses and have them take a look at their own fingerprints and determine what kind of fingerprint pattern do you have. Is it whorled? Is it looped? What is it? And then kind of take a look at those lines from an artistic standpoint. I pivoted back. So now I was working with the science standard. Now I'm pivoting back to the arts standard. So it's a very natural pivot and flow between my two content areas. Now, once I've done that and they've observed their own fingerprints and I have them kind of relate it back to the concept of line, then I have them play a little bit. I give them some ink and then they can actually play with fingerprinting. I teach them how to roll their fingerprints from side to side, but then we also practice manipulating our fingerprints a little bit by dragging and smudging and what that might look like. Once we've done that and we observe them again with the magnifying glass, then I have my students kind of take a look at inanimate objects around the room. And I have them select something. You can have them go outside if you want. You can have them take a picture from home and then bring it back in. There's a lot of variety that you could do with this kind of a lesson. But then they're going to look at how do I recreate that inanimate object using my fingerprints, using what I know about the fingerprints as a collaborative project, which means that I'm getting them together in a group and somebody has a whorl pattern on their fingerprints and somebody else has a looped pattern, and maybe one is better suited to recreate the image than another one. So again, they're using that an analytic thought, and I'm pivoting back and forth between the observation, the scientific observation and analysis, and artistic creation and process. So you notice that's how you have those seamless transitions. The key for a transition is always identifying your pivot points prior to implementing the lesson at all, because that will make sure that your lesson flows really beautifully. So that's my super secret tip this week about making sure that you have a successful STEAM lesson from start to finish. You want to look for those spaces where you can pivot between the arts content area and your other content area that you've identified so that you have natural transitions between both. Now, if you haven't already, I highly encourage you to join me for our free workshop that's coming up. I'm doing a live session tomorrow night at 7. I'm doing it again on Tuesday, next Tuesday at 5:30, which means we will not be having a Periscope PD next Tuesday night. I am just going to be zonked. And next Wednesday at 8 p.m. All of those are Eastern time. You are not going to want to miss that. You can sign up at educationcloset.com/workshop, and it's free, so you don't have to pay anything. And I share with you the exact process that I use to ensure that these lessons that you developed can be done quickly. So this sounds like a really complicated lesson that might have taken a while to create. Honestly, when we created this, it took us less than 2 hours, and we implemented it that week. So I'm going to share with you how to do that, and I'm so excited for this. I'm going to share with you how you can get this booklet, which has 3 of these lessons in it, already designed for you during that workshop. So I'm going to share with you how you can get that. So be sure that you sign up for that free workshop if you have not already done so. educationcloset.com/workshop. All right, so that's it for tonight. I hope that you all found this really helpful, and I look forward to seeing you on that workshop. Have a great one, everybody. Good night.